Welcome to the Upside Journal podcast. In 2026, domestic venture capital is struggling with extended exit timelines and dry powder gridlock. Yet a sophisticated layer of cross-border diaspora business networks is quietly unlocking predictable, counter-cyclical returns in AI and climate tech. Today, we're breaking down the hidden alpha traditional funds are missing. We're looking closely at the API economy, this transformative, invisible layer of modular software interfaces that are fundamentally rewriting the rules of high-growth enterprises across Africa. Here is our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start by defining the invisible startup layer, move into instant payments and mobile growth, examine verifying identity at scale, look at the regulatory sandbox catalyst, and wrap up with the API operator's playbook. Let's get right into it. Part 1. The invisible startup layer. To really grasp the VC paradox of 2026, we have to look back at the painful reality of the past. Think about a founder trying to build a lending product in Logos back in 2015. They were stuck dealing with a fragile, custom-built monolithic architecture. They needed a direct, bespoke banking relationship, they had to build a KYC pipeline entirely from scratch, and it took months of manual integration before they could even write a single line of actual product code. Now, contrast that with the 2026 API first built. Today, that exact same founder just plugs into an identity API, a payments API, and a compliance microservice. They can launch a working prototype in literally days. This scalable, modular infrastructure creates massive operational leverage because you are no longer wasting capital rebuilding foundational plumbing. So, what does this all mean economically? Well, at their core, APIs aren't just neat technical conveniences. They are the foundational economic building blocks of this new era. The API economy is the conversion of historically difficult, capital-intensive infrastructure into reusable endpoints that developers can call with a few simple lines of code. By exposing core functions like banking, automated compliance, and data ingestion pipelines as callable endpoints, regulated services become standardized blocks. A two-person startup can immediately consume them on day one. Let's trace how a modern transaction actually flows through this interoperable developer stack. First, an infrastructure provider builds a core capability, say a sophisticated payment switch, and wraps it in an API. Next, a developer integrates that API. Then, a startup ships a product built entirely on top of it. And finally, the consumer uses that product, completely oblivious to the mechanics underneath. The infrastructure itself is entirely invisible to the end user. The startup's job shrinks down to what is actually differentiated, the product experience and the underwriting logic, while all the heavy lifting is handled programmatically in the background. Okay, moving on to part 2, instant payments and mobile growth. Let's look at the macro signals driving this. According to the GSMA, mobile technologies and services added over $140 billion to sub-Saharan Africa's GDP in 2023. That is a staggering figure. It's creating a massive digital economy that simply demands seamless, programmatic integration. With unique mobile subscribers projected to hit 751 million by 2030, this macro-level growth proves exactly why API-driven scalability is an absolute non-negotiable for capital-efficient enterprises. And this data from Africanenda highlights just how aggressively fast these payment rails are maturing. Get this. Over 60% of live instant payment systems on the continent emerged just in the last 5 years alone. This surge is heavily fueled by mobile money and USSD networks, which allow users to bank using simple text menus on basic phones. This rapid proliferation of instant retail payment systems is bridging deep connectivity gaps and firmly establishing the bedrock of the API economy's payment layer. Which brings us to part 3, verifying identity at scale. Now, obviously, moving money instantly across cross-border networks means you absolutely must know exactly who is moving it. Enter programmatic data verification. Smile ID, for instance, has processed over 30 million KYC checks across the continent, becoming a totally crucial layer of this digital trust infrastructure. When startups expand across borders, building a bespoke compliance pipeline for every single new jurisdiction is just economically unviable. A modular identity API absorbs that friction entirely. The shift from highly vulnerable manual systems to automated API-first defenses is honestly staggering. Consider this. Outdated text-based checks miss up to 50% of fraud. But by shifting to AI-powered facial biometrics, providers are hitting 99.8% accuracy on African faces. These direct API integrations into government databases reduce bank fraud by a massive 87%. By eliminating the need for custom compliance builds, programmatic data verification is actively destroying local information asymmetries. This fundamentally lowers the barrier for talent and startups looking to scale software infrastructure across emerging markets. Let's shift gears to part 4, The regulatory sandbox catalyst. Because these APIs operate in a highly regulated environments, governments are actively testing these interoperable data stocks. Nigeria's central bank, for example, has steadily moved from paper rules to live testing. Back in 2021, the Open Banking Framework was approved. Fast forward to August 2026, and we see the launch of Sandbox Cohort 2, which features a dedicated track for data-enabled financial services. This gives startups a supervised, highly controlled environment for permission-based data sharing. It's essentially a live testing ground to prove that these modular API endpoints can operate safely at scale. However, there is a critical catch we have to point out. While the sandbox lowers the barrier for live testing, it absolutely does not grant companies an instant free pass from legal accountability. Sandbox participation grants regulatory proximity and learning, not a formal operating license. As an operator or an investor, you really have to understand that when you consume an API, you're shifting the technical burden, sure, but your regulatory exposure is inherited. It is not eliminated. And finally, Part 5, the API Operator's Playbook. To survive and build a repeatable flywheel in this landscape, operators need clinical, developer-led go-to-market strategies. First, you must explicitly map your infrastructure dependencies to know exactly where your true product differentiation lives. Second, because reliability risk concentrates quickly when you rely on third-party plumbing, you have to ruthlessly evaluate API providers on high-reliability uptime engineering and incident response. Third, model your per-transaction costs early to protect your unit economics. And fourth, prioritize multi-market coverage to enable compounding network effects during cross-border expansion. So I'll leave you with this provocative thought for the next wave of African tech. Are you building the plumbing, or are you just plugging into it? Where exactly does your competitive advantage lie in the era of callable code? Capital has become highly commoditized, but the infrastructure to execute high-trust cross-border deal flow is rare. To get ahead of these macro signals and access our premium investor network, subscribe to the Upside Journal and join our membership communities. See you in the next Daily Draw.